All right, today we're going to look at the things you buy every day in a totally new way. Thanks to a fascinating report from Friends of the Earth, we're about to pull back the curtain on the hidden environmental price tag of everything from your smartphone to your morning coffee.
So let's start with something most of us have in our pocket right now. You know exactly what you paid for it in dollars and cents, but have you ever stopped to think about what it really cost the planet?
Get this, according to the report's analysis, it takes almost 13,000 liters of water to produce a single smartphone. I mean, that's just a wild number, right? To give you a picture, that's like filling up 160 bathtubs for just one phone. That incredible amount of water has a name. The report calls it a water footprint. And really, it's just a way of measuring the total water used across the entire supply chain, from mining the raw materials all the way to the final assembly line. Okay, so to really wrap our heads around where a number that big comes from, we need to decode what a footprint actually is. Let's start with all that massive water usage. Now, this is where it gets really interesting. The report breaks this water footprint down into 3 different types, or colors. You've got blue water, which is the fresh water pulled from rivers and lakes. Then there's green water, that's rainwater, mostly for things like agriculture. And finally, gray water, and this one's a biggie. It's the amount of fresh water needed just to dilute the pollution created during manufacturing. Each one tells a different part of the story. And hey, it's not just about water. The report also calculates something called the land footprint, which is pretty much exactly what it sounds like, the total area of land needed for that whole supply chain. So, how does all this work in the real world? Well, the report's deep dive into what it takes to make a pair of leather boots is a perfect example. And check this out. This chart shows just how you make something matters. When the waste from leather tanning is treated properly, a pair of boots has a water footprint of about 14,500 liters. But if that waste goes untreated, the footprint just skyrockets by over 10,000 liters. That's mostly gray water needed to clean up the pollution. The land use is also pretty immense. The report found it takes 50 square meters of land to produce a single pair of boots. And get this, a whopping 86% of that land is just for the cattle ranching to provide the leather.
So what about the other things we buy all the time? Let's take a little peek inside a typical shopping bag and see what other secrets are hiding in there.
Even your morning ritual has a hidden footprint. 1 cup of coffee requires nearly 5 times more water to produce than a cup of tea. And the report shows that most of that difference comes down to the huge amount of green water, or rainwater, that it takes to grow and process all those coffee beans. And when you look at the data for other items, you start to see a really clear pattern. Things that come from agriculture, like a simple cotton t-shirt or chocolate bar, have incredibly high demands for both land and water. Okay, but this is where the whole thing gets truly mind-boggling. We're about to zoom out from these individual items to the unbelievable scale of global companies and entire industries. Just think for a second about all the clothes sold around the world every year. The report takes the footprint of that one t-shirt and scales it up to estimate the total impact for some of the biggest corporations on Earth. The cumulative effect is just enormous, 5,700 square kilometers. We're talking about a land area nearly 4 times the size of Greater London, all being used by just 10 of the world's top clothing companies. It's the exact same story with food. The resources needed to produce our favorite chocolates are absolutely immense when you start adding them all up. The report estimates a land footprint of 31,600 square kilometers for just the market leader in the candy aisle. That's an area the size of the entire country of Belgium needed just to supply one company's chocolate and sweets. Sometimes the biggest impact comes from the most unexpected place. In the toy industry, you'd think the plastic or the electronics would be the big thing, right? Nope. The report finds that the packaging alone accounts for a massive 84% of the land footprint. So, after seeing all these crazy, enormous numbers, what's the big takeaway? Well, the report's core message is actually pretty simple. You can't manage what you don't measure. Understanding these footprints is the critical first step to using our planet's resources more responsibly. And to that end, Friends of the Earth concludes that businesses and governments have to make these hidden footprints visible. They argue that companies should be required to measure and report them because voluntary action alone just isn't enough to tackle a problem this big. This one simple idea is really at the heart of the report's conclusion. Measurement isn't just about data. It's the absolute essential first step toward reducing our collective impact on the planet. Ultimately, the whole goal is transparency, because making these hidden costs visible empowers everyone, companies, governments, and us, the consumers, to make much more informed decisions about the products we create, regulate, and use every single day. And that brings us to a final question. Now that you've seen the invisible story behind the price tag, will you ever look at a simple product the same way again?